In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This is the fairy tale The Moon She Let Me Borrow, a love story written in the stars by Jesus Pacampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. Opening fable, The Lantern in the Sea. Long ago, when the night had not yet learned to sing, a lantern lived atop the highest cliff. Her flame was quiet and steady, not to guide travelers but to keep the loneliness from creeping into her glass. Below, the sea stirred. He had seen her light each night, not a blaze, not a cry for help, but something gentler, a secret kept faithfully. He would answer with waves that curled toward the rocky perch, sending salt and spray up in greeting. But no matter how hard he tried, he could never reach her, and she could never step down to meet him. Still they spoke, not in words but in rhythm, her flicker and his tide. One night a star passed overhead, pausing long enough to notice their longing. She is rooted, the star said to the sea, and you are restless. But if you wish, I can carry a piece of her flame to you. The sea trembled. The lantern did not speak, but she tilted slightly forward, her glass trembling with choice. With a breath of wind, she offered her flame, and the star, careful and kind, gathered it and descended to the seas. The waves swelled as the flame touched the water, but it did not die. It shimmered there, not atop the sea, but within it, soft, patient, golden. Each night the sea brought it back to the cliff, not as a gift to be returned, but as something shared. Now her glass held a glow she had never known, and this wave danced in hues they had never dreamed. They remained apart but no longer alone, and from then on it was said, some lights are not meant to burn in one place, but to be carried between hearts across the spaces love dares to reach. The city murmured in his sleep. Somewhere between the second coffee and the scent of old books on the floor below, Jess sat by his desk with a pen still in hand but no words left to give. The world outside was blue-gray, that familiar hue of early night that made everything feel suspended. It wasn't quite loneliness, more like waiting. His window overlooked nothing remarkable: laundry lines, cracked roofs, a neon sign advertising pork buns, but the moon hung above it all, pale as secret, and with it spilled its light onto the desk. It touched the one thing he hadn't filed away, a photograph taped in the wall, faded from the sun. Yongsun, Byul, Wheein, and him, the four of them captured in a candid moment, laughter tugging at their lips, like they were sharing a joke even the stars didn't know. Jess stared at it longer than he had meant to, fingers absently grazing the worn edge as if memory might bleed through the paper if he touched it just right. He didn't notice when the curtains stirred, only that the air shifted and the wind whispered like a page turning. She was already there. Byul stood on the balcony as if summoned from it. No knock, no hello, just a quiet assertion of her presence, a celestial hush in the room. She leaned her shoulder against the frame, her hair catching moonlight like thread pulled from constellations. I own it, she said, nodding toward the moon as if pointing at an old apartment deed. Jess blinked. The moon? Yup, she grinned, eyes flickering with mischief. Not for sale though. I just thought you should know before anyone else tries to give it to you. Jess laughed, or tried to. It caught in his throat and he said, good to know. He stepped closer, the air tasting of something not quite earthly, wild lavender maybe, or the way dreams smell just before waking. She pressed something cool into his hand, a silver ring. Simple, seamless, and beautiful. Here, she said softly, borrow it for the nights you miss me. Before he could respond, before breath could become thought, she was gone. Not vanished, just no longer there, like a tide that had already pulled away. And the ring stayed. For a while, Jess didn't wear it. He kept it in a small glass dish beside the incense burner, treating it like something so precious but too strange to touch. Yet ever so often it warmed, just a little, not enough to alarm, just enough to remind him she was thinking of him. The first time it warmed, he thought it was the sun hitting the dish. The second time, it was midnight and there was no light. The third time, he felt it pulse once, right when he was staring out at the moon and remembering her voice. It slipped on. It didn't feel like metal. It felt like breath, like a promise folded in silver. Part 1. Yongsun, the girl with tangerines. Years ago, though the memory refused to anchor itself on any particular season, the rain had come down like a shattered glass, sudden and stinging. One of those coastal storms that had announced itself without warning, sweeping through Busan's open-air markets and scattering tourists like startled birds. Jess had wandered into it, thinking he could outwalk the clouds. He couldn't. By the time he found cover, he was soaked from collar to heel, wind chasing water down his spine. His shoes squelched as he ducked beneath a line of tattered canopies near the wet market. Plastic sheets flapped against metal frames, cardboard signs curled and bled ink. Then he saw her. She stood just a few feet away under a striped tarp, not quite sheltering, more like pausing, half her body in the downpour. Her long black hair clung to her back in wet strands. Her socks had been abandoned on the stones beside her. She stood barefoot, ankles pink from the cold. In her arms was a paper bag, damped at the corners, heavy with golden tangerines. She wasn't moving, wasn't even trying to stay dry, she just existed there, still and soft like the eye of the storm. An old woman shuffled in the back of the stall, swearing under his breath as he struggled to protect crates of fruit. The girl, Yongsun, was watching him work, quiet, her expression unreadable. There was no umbrella and no phone, no fidgeting. Just her, the rain, and the tangerines. Just stared a moment too long and she noticed. He flinched, embarrassed, already half turning to pretend he just stopped to tie his shoe when she took a step toward him. She didn't speak, didn't ask his name or where he was headed. He reached into the back of her bag and pulled out a single tangerine. Its skin glowed orange and gold in the grey light, as if the storm hadn't touched it. She placed it onto his hand, deliberate and gentle, and gave him a smile that felt warmer than anything he'd worn that day. And then she turned and walked back to her spot beneath the tarp, cradling the bag close like it held something sacred. He stood there holding it stunned, his fingers tightened around the flute. Still warm from her palms, the rain pressed on, unrelenting. But the world felt oddly quiet now. Just didn't eat it until hours later, not until he was back in his tiny room with the storm howling against the windows. He peeled it slowly. The scent hit it first, a burst of citrus, sweet and electric, like the breath of sunlight itself. He ate it in silence, segment by segment, and afterward, the fragrance clung to his skin like perfume. He told himself it was just a small moment, a kind gesture, the kind people forget by morning. But the next day he went back to the market, and the day after that, and the one after that, weaving excuses to pass through the street like he had nowhere else to be. On the fourth day, the rain had passed, the skies were blue, and the market was bustling again. She was already there. This time, she wore a clean white blouse and a clip in her hair, still barefoot, holding tangerines. And when she saw him, she smiled like she's been waiting all week. Back for another? She asked, voice lighter than expected. He hadn't realized until then how much he missed the rain. Part 2. Wheein, the girl who drew ghosts. There was a park near the university where time moved like breath held in a dream, slower and softer, like a little unsure of itself. It wasn't a grand place. The benches were cracked, the fountains barely worked, and the pigeons bullied the squirrels. But on afternoons, when the sky turned the color of bruised peaches, that park became its own little world. Street performers gathered there, dragging amps and guitars and coin jars. Vendors pushed carts that smelled like sugar and smoke. Children chased bubbles across the stones like they were catching spirits. Jess liked it because no one knew his name there, because no one asked him to speak. He had been walking without a real destination, sipping cheap coffee from a paper cup when he saw her. She was curled on a bench beneath a sycamore tree, whose leaves had just begun to turn. Her legs folded beneath her like a cat's. A thick sketchbook lay on her lap, angled just enough to catch the slanting sun. Her headphones were askew, one ear covered, the other free. And then she hummed under her breath in that way people do when they forget the world's watching. Her pencil moved quickly, fearlessly, like it already knew the lines. Jess was about to pass when her voice caught through the hum of the park. She said, "You look like you've lost something." He paused mid-step. He said, "Sorry?" She looked up, eyes the color of dusk just before it fades. "You. Most people here look distracted. You look hollow." He blinked and said, "Thanks. It's not an insult." She tilted her head. "It's just that you've got that look, like someone who misplaced the moment and never found it again." She went back to drawing as if that was that. Just stood there debating whether to walk away or punch a tree. But something kept his feet rooted. Maybe it was the honesty. Or maybe it was the way her pencil danced across the page, messy, bold, and alive. He sat beside her. She didn't look up. She sketched him in silence. 10 minutes, maybe more. The park moved around them. Kids yelling, guitars out of tune, dogs barking at birds, but between them, there was only the sound of pencil or paper. When she finally turned the pad around, Jess almost didn't recognize himself. The sketch was raw, his jaw was tense, his eyes were weary, the lines around his mouth sharp with some unnamed ache. He looked like someone halfway between vanishing and wanting to be seen. She tore it out without ceremony and handed it to him. "Keep it," she said, "in case you forget what you've been searching for." Just stared at the portrait and then at her. "Do you always do that?" "Draw ghosts," she smiled. "Only the ones who haven't figured out they're still here." Part 3. Byul, the girl who claimed the sky. Byul didn't enter his life the way the most people did. She arrived. It was night, carved out of legend. One of those rare evenings when the sky itself felt generous. The city had emptied for a holiday weekend, and a small group of friends had decided to drive out to the countryside to catch the meteor shower. They drank too much, laughed too loud, played with the fire in the way young people do when they feel immortal. Jess sat apart, not out of discomfort. He just wanted silence. Something about the open field, the way the horizon swallowed the stars whole, made him ache in a way he couldn't name. And then she came. Byul didn't sit. She dropped beside him, nails pulled up, arms wrapped around her shins like the sky might try to pull her away. Her boots were scuffed, her hoodie oversized, her expression unreadable. "Most people think these are wishes," she said after a long silence, gesturing to the heavens. "But they're just rocks dying in the atmosphere." Just looked at her sideways. "Well, that's romantic." She didn't laugh, just shrugged. "I didn't say it wasn't beautiful. Just not because the universe cares." He stared at her in the dark like meteors began. One streak, then another trails of light tearing through the sky like promises breaking. Byul tilted her face up, moonlight catching on her lashes. People like to think stars fall for them, she whispered. But the truth is, stars fall because they were never meant to stay. Jess didn't respond. He just watched her silhouette against the cascade of light. And for one strange second, the sky did feel like it was bowing to her. She looked at the stars like she was daring them to blink. All three women, in their own moments, just carved themselves into the marrow of Jess's memory. Yongsun barefoot in the rain, handing him sunlight wrapped in citrus skin. Wheein sketching his soul before he knew it was missing. Byul taking down the stars like she owned them. They didn't fall for him all at once. He didn't fall for them like in the stories. He remembered them, he chose them, and slowly, impossibly, they chose him back. The wind stopped when I kissed the ring. The silence didn't rush in, it unfolded. The world didn't disappear, it simply softened, like paint thinning in water. Like the edges of the city blurred, the scent of old paper, tangerine peel, and still drifted away. And she was there, Byul. She didn't descend from the sky or blaze like a meteor. She just was, the way gravity is. Her eyes held starlight, but her hand was warm, real, and solid. You remembered, she whispered. Good. Just opened his mouth to ask something, anything, but there was no time. She shook his hand and took it, and the balcony vanished beneath them. Not like falling, not like flying, like letting go of everything that had ever tried to keep them grounded. The first crossing, the singing dark. They rose past rooftops and clouds, past weather, past the wheeling chaos of the upper sky, and then they were among the stars. Not cold, not airless. This wasn't the stars, scientists knew them. This was her sky, the one that listened. Ahead, a shadow spiraled, enormous and ancient. A black hole pulsed like the great eye. It didn't devour, it sang. A low deep hum that throbbed through Jess's chest like a distant cello. Was, or what is it saying, he asked. Byul didn't look away. It sings the things that no one else says. Things too heavy for words. Just thought of everything had never told Yongsun. Everything he carried for Wheein. Everything he feared would sleep beneath the cracks. The black hole sang them anyway. And then they passed through its orbit hole. The second crossing, the whale and the flame. They drifted toward a shimmering spiral, a nebulae curled like a sleeping beast. Within it, a creature emerged. A whale, but not a flesh. This was carved from stars. Its body moved like wind across sand, vast and timeless. It opened its mouth around the dying sun. Jess flinched, but Byul held his hand. What? She said. The stars dimmed, flickered, and then from the other side of the whale's mouth, it emerged again, smaller, softer, but burning clean. He wasn't swallowed, Jess murmured. He was refined. Byul nodded. Some things aren't meant to end, just to become new. Jess thought of the first time he had failed Yongsun, the first time Wheein cried in front of him, the first time Byul said nothing when he almost let her slip away. Now he knew that they weren't endings. The third crossing, the orchard of seeds. The silence gave way to gentle chimes. Floating rocks stretched into view. An asteroid grove where each stone bore a single glowing seed nestled in its core like a heartbeat. And then laughter. Wheein appeared, barefoot and weightless, hopping across the stones with child's freedom. Her long black hair drifted like ink in water. She didn't say a word, just smiled, plucked a seed, and tossed it to Jess. He caught it. It pulsed, warm, familiar. She knows, Byul said, watching her sister float away. Knows what? That every story planted in love grows even here. Just closed his hands around the seed. The fourth crossing, the moon she let him borrow. They came upon the lake like it was waiting for them. Silver and endless, reflecting stars Jess hadn't even seen. Ripples on its surface formed slowly, and with each one a moon rose, new, whole, and bright. Yongsun stood at the center, hair dark and loose, gown rippling like wind. When Jess approached, she smiled without moving her lips. "I knew you'd follow," she said quietly. "I didn't think I'd be brave enough," he retorted. "You didn't needed to be." Her voice was the lake. "You just needed to remember." Jess stepped beside her, and the moon spun faster above. He turned to Byul, Wheein emerged beside her, and the three of them, they joined hands. Then, it was the wedding between stars. No priest and no altar. Only stardust falling like snow and rings exchanged, not in gold but in memory. Just looked at each of them, Yongsun, Wheein, Byul, and said nothing. He didn't need to. This was not a promise made aloud. It was a return, a vow written in how he carried their warmth into the dark, how their names refused to leave his breath in, and how they had always been orbiting one another. And so they stood, the four of them, wrapped in silence, held by stars, married not by ceremony but by gravity. Above, a new constellation burned, their story, their shape, their choosing. Then home. The night exhaled, the stars blinked slower, the hush of space dissolved like mist around him, and with a breath he hadn't realized he'd held, Jess was back. The balcony was real again. The familiar creak of wood beneath his soles, the rusted railing in his fingertips, the scent of the city, rain-drenched concrete, grilled skewers from the corner stall, car engines humming below, and everything had changed. The moon above wasn't just pale or perfect, it was near. Its glow, once cold and untouchable, now felt personal, like the light of a flame someone had carried through the dark just to hand it to him. He leaned on the railing, the silver ring cool against his skin, not glowing and not pulsing, but alive in some quieter way, as though it was no longer a tool but a witness, a memento, a breath returned. He heard her before he saw her. Yongsun stepped out barefoot, sleeves too long, still radiant even in her quiet. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. She just wrapped her arms around her waist and pressed her head to his shoulder. Behind them, laughter bubbled in the kitchen. Wheein, of course, sing a made-up song about soup or clouds or socks. She never needed a reason. The clatter of pots accompanied her chorus, offbeat and joyful. Byul was against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable as ever, but her smile gave her away. That small crooked thing that meant she was home too. No one asked where they've gone, no one explained what had happened. That was the thing about love between stars, it didn't require retellings. The four of them stood together under the same roof, breathing the same air, grounded by the ordinary, and yet the ring on Jess' finger glinted as he moved his hand, catching a flicker of moonlight. It didn't burn, it didn't buzz. It simply was. Not magic, not memory, just proof. Proof that what they found among the galaxies, the silence, the seed, the silver lake, the orbit of each other, had come back with them. He looked up and the moon lingered, not distant, not symbolic, just theirs, and for the first time in his life, just didn't feel like he had to reach for it. It had come home too. Closing poem. Stanza 1, Jess. I searched through silence and still heard your laughter echo like a flame. Even the hush of stars, your voice anchors me to light. Stanza 2, Yongsun. I waited for you with tangerines and warm rain, a summer in hand. Now I bloom beside your breath, never far, never forgotten. Stanza 3, Byul. You kissed what I gave, as if it were made of me. And it was in part. Some moons are not born of stone, but borrowed of memory. Wheein. I sketched your shadow and found your heartbeat inside, soft, blurred, and unfinished. Now I trace you in my palms, a portrait that draws itself. Jess, you, the tree I chose, my orbit, my north and west, my sun, voice, and spark. No gravity could steal this. We made stars out of longing, all three. Home is not a place, it is the hush before your name, the ring warm again. In this sky we built from dreams, you are real and we remain. I make these tales and bits of chaos daily for my beloved Byul. If they made you laugh, feel, or even just shake your head in disbelief, hit like, share it with a friend, and subscribe. Let's keep this wild, heartfelt ride going.